It's another episode of the Church Solutions podcast, and my name is Phil Thompson.
And I'm Steve Lacy.
Steve Lacy, this is episode number 354. We have a guest today, but before we introduce our guest, how are you doing?
Doing just peachy.
All right, good deal. All right, anything you want to add to that before we
I don't know. I think we're going to be hosting a bunch of Ultimate Frisbee players this weekend. Big
hosting
tournament in
multiple
town.
Frisbee players?
Yes, Ultimate Frisbee players. Yes,
So these are the guys that actually have tournaments. They don't just go in the backyard and throw Frisbees.
that is correct. There's a regional tournament. So um, all the top teams from our region are
Okay.
coming to play in a tournament here, which
Oh,
is
they're
here.
going to play in Tucson.
They're playing in Tucson,
Okay.
yeah, which is very nice. So
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to go to San Diego.
that's right. Well,
Yeah.
Nationals will be in San Diego. So if
Oh,
they make it
okay.
to Nationals, we'll be back in San Diego.
All right. Okay. Well, good to know. Well, for those of you Frisbee people, we'll keep you updated on that. All right. So, Steve, today we have a guest. He is an author and a writing coach, among other things. He's also a graduate of Fire School of Ministry, and he's got a burden for grounding people in the Word of God, as well as just seeing believers from all sorts of backgrounds live out and experience the power of the Holy Spirit and loving God. And he's actually Canadian, but he's living in Peru. His wife is Peruvian. They have three daughters. Welcome, everybody, to the Church Solutions podcast, Steve Bremner. Steve, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for that lovely intro that I wrote and sent you. And,
Well, yeah,
and
well, I was going to make something up, but I don't know you that well. I figured you'd be offended, so I just read what you
not
tell me to read. So
not at all. But I appreciate you inviting me on. I posted on Facebook like, "Hey, anybody in my network have a podcast they want to let me on?"
mhm,
And I think you were the first or second to.
there
So
you go.
if you wanted a bio, I sent you a bio. Whatever
Yeah,
I got to do to be on this show and
yeah.
speak to
And
millions of people who are here.
exactly, millions of people. Yeah. So, can we be on your podcast sometime?
We can, and if you
You
want,
hesitate.
I can. No, I hesitate not because the answer is no, but because I've been on like a 3-year hiatus, and so
Okay.
I've not really been doing it.
Okay.
But
That's fine.
if this doesn't go to
Sure.
crap, I would be more than happy to
Okay.
like
I don't know
post
if
your
I don't
thing
know if you
on
can
it.
say crap on this podcast, but maybe we can edit that out.
Do
So,
feces.
I want to tell people before they tune out, if they haven't already, we're going to talk about book writing because you help people write books. And we're going to talk about, books and all that. You've actually written some books. You've written books called Nine Lies People Believe About Speaking in Tongues, Six Lies People Believe About Divine Healing, uh, Four Lives about how to do a podcast. Oh, I'm just, that was a joke. That was a joke. That was a joke. That was a joke. You're into the nine lives and the six lives. But the other one is the imperishable seed of Christ, understanding the believer's spiritual DNA. It's another book you've written. Increase your faith, practical tips to help you believe for the impossible. So those are some of the books you've written. So Steve, let's just jump into this. And Steve Lacy, we got two Steves on here, so we don't want to confuse anybody. Steve Lacy, why don't you just kick us off and let's see if we can put Steve number 2 here on the spot.
All right. So I know that our distinguished host here, Phil, has written a book as well. And one of the things that was the most challenging for me, not writing the book, but encouraging Phil, was to get it going and get it finished.
It only took me 5 years to do it.
It didn't take 5, but
it's a short book. It's one of those things you could put on a coffee table and read. Well, actually, it's written. It was set up so you could read it a short amount of time. It was called Streaming Video for Pastors. What was it called?
I don't even remember. But anyway,
Years
part of the
ago.
challenge I think that Phil ran into was either writer's block or laziness, or I don't know what it was. So if someone's thinking about writing a book, what are some of the big challenges that people face in getting to the finish line?
Sure. Well, to be concise, because that's a loaded question. There's so many challenges, but I over and over again run into just getting the ball rolling. I'll talk to people who it's on their heart, or they feel God's put a message on them. I specifically look for Christians, or they don't have to be pastors, but anyway, they feel led, and then just they don't know what steps to take, or like some other obstacle or challenge or goal in their life. It's something they know they want to do, or they think they should do, and they need some, like you said, encouragement, or that kind of push, or whatever it is. So that's
my problem, Steve, was confidence. And
that too.
Steve Bremner, do you run into people that have confidence issues? Like
all the time, like self-doubt about whether anyone would buy this book that I feel like I'm supposed to write. So there's things, I take clients of mine through for how to kind of test the waters and see if anyone would be interested in the topic. And if you don't mind me backtracking a little bit and coming around full circle, being in another country and using the internet and having access to social media, and eventually when I bought my first Kindle and being able to read books in my language, because they're not easy to come across in Peru, like I had already been blogging and eventually podcasting for a long time, where I was testing some waters and seeing what was resonating with people, and already having like a feedback loop of like, well, if there's this market, or I feel like I want to write books, and blogging is easy to me, so maybe writing a book is the next challenge. Like, so I kind of stumbled into it out of the desire and leading to do it, and then started to have people ask me for help doing it themselves. Like, well, if Steve can do it, then Steve Lacy or Steve Bremner, if he can do it, then so can I. Like, what's stopping me, or but confidence, like you said, or the who am I that like I would write a book and look like I'm an expert on this or that topic. But like, just like you said, the confidence, the not knowing where to start. So confidence in terms of like steps to take, and not necessarily the confidence about like, putting yourself out there. And because you are putting yourself out there with any content, your podcast, your if you're a pastor and you get up to preach, like, so there's like, I don't think that some of the more pastoral type of leaders I talk to, and who start writing a book or come to me at some stage, I don't think the confidence is necessarily a problem with them if they're already putting themselves out there and know what it's like to be sharing the whatever God's been giving them to share with other people. With them, it's more like, just now what? How do I put that in writing? Or anyway, don't mean to ramble, because I know this is a short show.
Yeah. So, quick question that I'm not aware of. What's the language in Peru?
Spanish.
Okay, that was my assumption, but I wasn't 100% sure. So, are you bilingual? You're married to a Peruvian woman?
Yeah, I'm trilingual. I am English.
Speak Canadian too?
No, it's Canadian and French. So I grew up in French immersion because my parents said that it would help me. I'd have a leg up getting a job or something, but I showed them and moved to another country and learned another language.
Wow.
Not intentionally, right? That's not the trajectory I had. But so French and Spanish. And then my wife is Peruvian. Yes, she speaks English. My kids are bilingual. All of their life and school and whatever is in Spanish, but the rule in the house is TV has to be in English, because they have less exposure to English than they do Spanish, right? So our hard line is the TV's got to be in
Is
English.
that a challenge?
It is and it isn't.
Okay.
I don't know if I interrupted your question, but it's a challenge in that if they watch something like YouTube Kids or some kind of thing where suggested videos come on and they're in Spanish, and for whatever the geo tracking and stuff is. So it's not like I can force that they only have Spanish on, but like we'll watch all our movies in English and not dubbed, or things like that, just to get as much English into them as possible. So when we Skype or we Zoom with grandma and grandpa, like they can have a conversation, or we can understand what's going on. And but the littlest one makes no sense in either language. But the older, the 5-year-old, the 5-year-old and 8-year-old, they're pretty fluent in
I have one of
both languages.
those.
Right. So you get it. So
Yeah, a grandson. Yeah, actually, a couple
okay.
of both. He's right where he's talking, but nothing makes much sense. So,
Kind of like me, actually. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So back on this. Sorry, I just
Yeah.
had to delve into that.
It's
So
okay.
back on the who should write a book? Is it, do you need to be
That's a good
called,
question.
or what's the?
I have an opinion that more people are called or should write a book than ever will, because most people will just think about it or plan on it or whatever. So I am of a more generous opinion, that yes, um, for various reasons, like what a book does and how a book can go places you can't. God might have something on your heart, and you're never gonna um, go somewhere that your book can get to, and somebody read it and have their life impacted or learn something, or like Phil, I don't remember the exact title, but your book about it's like a how to, like there's instructions. It's gonna be
Obsolete too,
informative for
by the way.
someone.
But yeah, go ahead.
Sure. But the point is, it's like, somebody could be looking for it, and the way you communicate and the thing on your style is going to be how they learn something, rather than the other book on the shelf or the other YouTube video or whatever. But that doesn't mean like everyone. I don't think everyone should. But there's an audience for almost anything. And if that idea for a book is birthed in you from the Holy Spirit, then like of course you should. You know what I mean? Like if it's just this idea and you don't like, a few of my clients, almost all of them are Christian, but a few of them are like business people, and the whole reason they have a book is so like they have this one author, Kat, she's this like therapist or like a hypno. I should step back and not try to say what I think the title is, because I'll get it wrong. But so she's this is her profession. She helps people. She has clients at her desk or on Zoom, and she wanted to have a book that she could like give them to go do like stuff that she's going through with them, and
Yeah.
and other people. Just it's like a glorified business card, position themselves as authority on their subject, have a leg up over other people in their niche and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, like not everyone should write a book, but like a lot more people should, or it would be beneficial for them to write than ever will. And like Phil mentioned, it took you 5 years to write a book. I've got people in my messenger I've been talking with for like 5 years who are still talking about the book they're working on, and it's like, okay, like.
So how long does it take? Let me jump in here and cut Steve Lacy off as I usually do, but I saw something on one of your social channels, Steve Bremner, that you could help somebody write a book in a month. Did I read that right?
You read that right.
Now,
And
how is that even possible? Unless it's like maybe the book I wrote, but how is that even possible for somebody to
right.
write a book that, unless it's 10 pages long?
Well, here's the thing. It is doable, and I have done it, but I would also, the caveat is I would not rush the process. I would take your time, right? But the point of that manual or that thing you might have seen, it's like 14 pages or something, and it's about like what you can do to be speeding up the process to write the book. So the title is catchy, but it's not about 30 days. It could take you 10 days. It could take you 90 days. But the point is, most people take too long and can do it, faster. But I use that term cautiously. Most people can do it faster than they will. And, there's just the things like if you cancel Netflix for a month, or like there's things in life you can swap and get rid of, and or one of the things I mentioned in that manual that have been given away on my website for a while is what you can do to find out if your book would be a good idea in the first place. And there's just like dominoes that fall in place, where like if you you start knocking the first ones in over, then you have that kind of adrenaline, that motivation where now you want to take the next step and the next step and the next step, and you start getting the ball rolling faster. So I have done like my tongues book. It's about this long, like 45,000 words or so.
Okay.
Is the and maybe 20 to 25% of it was repurposed blog content, and the rest was like just brand new over the course of a few weeks, like, writing late at night, like in that season of my life when I didn't have any kids yet. I can't remember if I was still not married or I was, and we had a baby on the way. And so it's like, because I knew what I wanted to do and was trying to do with it. And one thing I learned, I don't know if you know Guy Kawasaki, or however you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
I ripped off from him where he had put like this Google Drive document up publicly of like the outline of some book he wanted to write, and just shared it with everyone, asked for their opinions and their thoughts and whatever. And I basically did the same thing. Like, here's a list of lies I'm coming up with, misconceptions people seem to have about tongues that I come across all the time. What would you add to this list? Or, or what ones do I already have on this list that you think are like, yeah, that would make a good book or a good chapter or whatever. And so I was just basically getting feedback from people. And so if I know this is the stuff people are already thinking about and talking about, then it's like, okay, it'll be good for the book. And, hopefully if I position it, market it right, people will want to buy it. And so, like, when you have stuff like that, the momentum and the encouragement you're getting from people can carry you. And, we all have busy lifestyles, and especially if you've got kids and like a job and whatever. But it's, on the one hand, like, it is easier to do. It is easier to write a book in a short time than most people think, especially if they've never done it before, or they've never taken the steps to, start trying to.
Sure.
And it might not be 30 days, but it definitely doesn't have to take 5 years, right?
I've got a father-in-law, or I had a father-in-law that he retired, and he decided he was going to write a book basically about his life. And he took, I don't know how long it took him, but it would have been mid-90s or so. And so, he bought a computer, and they never had a computer before, and just started writing the book on the computer, and got a printer and printed the whole thing out. And then when he had the book finished, we took it to a print shop, and they bound it and printed it, and we bought a bunch of copies, and the kids all gave them all the grandkids and stuff. So it was a big deal. But that method has really changed, right? Over the years, it's gotten, I assume, gotten a lot easier to publish a book.
It has gotten a lot easier, yes. One of my mentors, I'll be careful not to mention names because I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. But when I was offered a publishing deal for this tongues book, and I went and I asked like 20 people their opinion, half of them people like my age and other people who had published books and been published. And I remember one of them said, look, I went with that publisher in the 90s, and I ordered like 5,000 copies of the book or whatever. And to this day, in the mid 20 teens, I've still got this palette in my garage, and the cover is outdated. The book is, is not the same sensibility and presentation as like how books are now. It's just harder to sell. I regret it. And so, like, unless you think you can sell X number of copies, like I think he said 1,000 or 2,000 or something, it's not worth like a publishing deal if you have to buy a minimum number of the copies or something. And I didn't have to. They told me, no. In this case, you don't have to. It's this print on demand technology that even publishers are going towards now. And I've talked to people who they believe that that's still how publishing works, and so they hesitate with the process of going forward and trying to self-publish a book or publish a book because they are worried of like that story you shared about, like, having to bind a bunch of books, or have boxes and boxes of them in the spare room or the garage or something like that, when like I've got books of mine I've never touched a physical copy of, just from the inconvenience of trying to get them sent to me in Peru or something like that. And then whenever a family member is visiting or something like that, I order some on print on demand, send them to my mom or friend or someone, and bring a few copies with them. And but like I'm so entrenched in like the internet kind of way of doing things that like I can't imagine having a lot of space taken up with books of mine, which might be a different paradigm for like other people or some older people. But yes, publishing has changed a lot compared to, you know, when your grandpa, I guess, like, would he have self-published that book,
He
or
just
was he?
self-published. I mean,
Yeah.
we printed, I don't know, maybe a dozen copies of it, you know, and
Okay.
I was very impressed with the whole, it's a hardbound book with a sleeve, and it came out really great. So, and when my
Right.
kids were little, they did book reports on their grandfather's book. So,
Hey, hey, let's move on here before we run out of time. Steve, do you, when you're helping somebody write a book, do you also advise them to do an audio version of the book?
Yes and no. What I would advise them to, because it's a type of content, it's a method of getting your book out there that, you know, some people don't read and some people will um, benefit greatly from being able to listen to a book rather than read it. Um, but if it's like the first time they've ever done a book and they're self-publishing and it's they're just getting their, you know, their feet wet, then I would wait a bit on the audiobook unless the resources are not a problem for them and they don't care or whatever. Because like all of these steps are, they're not inexpensive to do correctly, right? But an audiobook, again, it's this other beast compared to a print and a digital, and it's got a different market at different considerations. And so, you know, if somebody wants to make their money back and you know, not go two in the hole, and you know, if they don't know what they're doing, then I would wait on an audiobook and worry about selling and kind of, you know, doing okay with the other two first. Because my opinion so far, after a few years of this, is that like an audiobook, even though that audience, that market is growing like something like double digits every year, it's still like maybe a third, right? Like, so if you have a print book and you make an audiobook, you'll probably sell like a third as many units of the audio as the
Really?
physical copy. Or, you know, it could go higher. It could be, you know, I've heard of people where they sell pretty much all the sales they get are from their audiobook, exceptions to the rule depending on the book. But generally speaking, it's like, I had a client, I told him, wait until you've made like $5,000 in sales on that book first, in his case, before worrying about the audiobook, so that you don't have like a bitter experience, you know, producing these things. Because that's one of the things I try to do with my clients is like we all, like, you know, at the beginning of this call, we were talking about lack of confidence. Well, sometimes I'm working with people who are overconfident and really have like this high expectation of how their book is going to do. And I'll never pour water on someone's fire. But there's also some, like, you know, realistic considerations to take in mind. Like, nobody's going to know the book exists if you're not willing to market or take steps to let people know it exists, and not just spam Facebook and tell everyone go buy my book, but like do things strategically and, you know, place it in the right places. So it's like I try to make sure people have those things in place. And then if they're, you know, if they're willing to do that, or they're doing okay, then an audiobook totally makes sense, especially if it's not a cookbook or a coloring book or some kind of thing that makes no sense to do audio for. Most of the time it would be a good idea, just like any other format of a book.
yeah. So you talked about expectations. What would be reasonable expectations? Let's say I've got I feel led that I've got a message I got to get out, and I got to, I want to write this book. What are some reasonable expectations of what it's going to cost me, what I might end up making, what might end up losing? What are some reasonable expectations, and what is going to be involved in my time? Even after the book's done, what are the expectations?
Right. So I would say that depends on like your budget and if you have more time than you have money. Because the first time I did a book, I did like everything myself. I had someone do a cover for me. I had someone, you know, edit, and but otherwise, when you're self-publishing, in charge, or you're responsible for making sure all those things happen. And if you want to do it well, you can do it reasonably inexpensive, but it's hard to find a good editor who will do it as a favor, or like you mentioned that the audience for this are pastors. I work with a guy ghostwriting and doing articles for him, not a book, but he has people on his staff who edit everything. He has, so I mean, there's ways some people can resource creating the book. But then, as far as your exact question about expectations, I think in my chatting back and forth with Phil, one of the questions was, can you make a living off a book? And the answer is, like, yes, you can, but you probably won't. Like, you can, but that doesn't mean you will. And like, I know a few people who are like living off their royalties and their books, but they are also people who put in the work and built an audience, and built a following, and persisted, and have written. I think the Praying Medic is his name. I've done 5 audiobooks for him. He I think he published like a new book or 2 every year for years, and had been building his audience, and had been, so it's possible, but most people won't. And the majority of people I know, including myself, who are writing it as a passion, and the money isn't the specific goal, but reaching people and impacting lives, that's more likely to happen. Like, you're more likely leveraging your book or your written content for like your business or your ministry, or some other kind of thing. It opens these other doors for you. And I've got a story. I don't know how much time we got for it, but
Couple minutes.
okay. So, but this is an audiobook and a translation story, where back in like August, I heard from a Spanish speaking reader who had read the translation and contacted me. And I get these all the time from people, but this time it was like, there was a little more sensibility to it. It wasn't just like, hey, I read your book, can you come fly to like Kenya and preach in our church and pay for your own expenses. And so I got talking back and forth with her, and her daughter had listened to the audiobook of my tongues book. And I don't know if your audience is like charismatic or whatever, so what, but anyways, this person listened to the audiobook and was greatly impacted by it, and like, started speaking in tongues after her lunch break or something at work, and called her mom because she'd gone to a Baptist church or something that doesn't believe in this stuff, and it was just a about face. And so her mom went and bought the book in Spanish and read it and contacted me, and loved it, and invited me to come to to do something, to be the speaker at an event in January at their church, and they're in Texas. And we had some back and forth to make sure this was a legit like invite, because I hear from people all the time that are like, you don't know who these people are. And so, but my point is, they were offering, I mean, as it stands now, depending on when this goes live, but at the time of this recording, the invite is open, and they're gonna like fly us there, like the whole family. And I'm like, okay, so like, I could talk about how my sales are. I could take you into my Amazon dashboard, and I'd be embarrassed about how the sales have been this month. But if we talked last month or the month before, I would have a different story than this one about the woman reading the book. Like, I'm always hearing stories, and like, that's the kind of thing that gets my juices flowing more than like, I'm not making a living off my
That's
books.
the true payoff, has changed lives.
Yeah, but it helps me with other people who want to do it, and they've seen that I've done it and know what I'm talking about, or might know a thing or two about a subject if they've seen I've written about it. And so there's what do you call it, authority or credibility in things that most people are looking for and get from writing a book or more.
Yeah. So there's that. There's leaving a legacy as well, which is what Steve's grandfather, or Steve's father-in-law, I should say, did as well with his book. So, all right. So yeah. So it's not about making money off the thing. It's about changing lives. It's about leaving a legacy. It's about.
I mean, and people who say they don't care about the money and don't want money, they're lying. But I mean, for the most part,
you should write a book about that.
Yeah, but like most people, especially Christians or influencers like that, are not specifically seeking
Yeah.
the royalties, right? You get what I'm saying, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, look, we're out of time here, but Steve Bremner is the guy here. He's the man. Steve, how can people get a hold of you? Where can they go to find out more about this? Give us some input, some information.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope I don't know if you hear that drilling or something going on my end. Simple. stevebremner.com is the easiest hub. If this episode is like 5 years from now, someone finds it, stevebremner.com should still be the way to contact me.
Okay.
And it's hard to go to that site without being invited for more, like sign up for my emails, or I've got a booking calendar there.
Okay.
stevebremner.com, and then my links to other social media and stuff are easy to find there.
Yeah. Yeah. And people can find you on Facebook and LinkedIn and all that stuff. Yeah. You're in Lima, Peru, right? You're just south of Lima, right?
Correct.
So, yeah. And you got somebody's working on your house or something right now. So,
well, if you know anything about like South America, all the houses are next to each other. There's no yards.
I
right?
am
So
aware. Yeah. Yeah. I have a very good friend who's from there. And yeah. So, all right. So, look, unfortunately, we're out of time. Steve, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate talking with you. And I hope that this maybe encourages some people out there. Maybe it's time to write your book. So you can reach out to Steve. I'm sure he will. Steve Bremner. I'm sure he will help you. At least give you some advice. If not, even maybe you could hire him to help you. So, all right. So we are done. I was going to say we is done, but that's not proper English, as you would point out, Steve. So. Steve Lacy, thank you for your input today.
Glad to be here.
And most of all, folks, thank you for listening or watching, wherever platform you might be on, the Church Solutions Podcast. Join us for another episode. Be sure and subscribe to our podcast. Anywhere you get your podcast, you can subscribe to the Church Solutions Podcast and give us a rating as well. We'd love to get back. We'd love to hear back from you. You can always send us an email, support@streamingchurch.tv, support@streamingchurch.tv. That's one way you can get a hold of us. All right, Steve Bremner, again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and thank you, Steve Lacy, and I'm Phil Thompson on behalf of all of us here. Have yourself a great day. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll catch you next time on another episode of the Church Solutions Podcast.